Okay, we're recording. Just a warning.
I can't take back anything I say from this point.
Sure, we can erase the thing.
I think we have some more people coming.
Hey, come on in.
Sorry, I've never been here. Couldn't find it.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Well, why don't we just go ahead and continue what we're doing?
Yeah.
I'm thinking it'd be a good idea if we introduced ourselves the way we want to, instead of somebody else doing it. So, would you go ahead?
Sure. I'm Brad Olson, and how do I want to introduce myself? I am a psychotherapist, a depth psychotherapist, Jungian analyst, a private practice, and a cultural mythologist, I suppose, by training. And George and I have been talking about consciousness and exploring that realm for years and years now. And a long time ago, we decided to make our conversations public. And we started having meetings. We just invited people to come like this.
And they came.
And they came.
Like you.
We thought we were so interesting to ourselves, we'd certainly be interesting to others.
And you were right.
So we just thought we'd take that dive, and so here we are. And I also have returned recently to using hypnosis a lot. Speaking of consciousness, which is a really interesting way to explore consciousness. And
Well, you were always a hypnotist anyway. Now you're getting formal training, so you're going to be even more dangerous.
it's a polite way of saying I put people to sleep when I talk.
Then you can blame it on hypnosis.
Yeah.
I really do want to introduce the cop aspect of you. I think that's a dimension that needs to be spoken, if you don't mind.
No, please. I used to be a police officer before I became a psychologist, and I was a cop for about 6 years. I worked in Phoenix, and prior to that was up in North Dakota for a while, and eventually got out with myself reasonably intact, and I think that influences a lot of our conversations.
It
because
does.
we have a similar background in a lot of respects.
We have a rudeness and a crudeness about us
Yeah.
in a positive fashion.
Yeah. So George's marineness messes, it meshes with my copness, and it works pretty well.
Sure does. Well, I'm George Breed, and let's see, I've been in the trenches a long time, and now I'm a geezer. Geezer meaning one who is in disguise, one who is not as he or she appears, is the true definition. I've been a psychologist, I've been a truck driver, I've raised hogs, Marines. I was in the martial arts for a long time, the external martial arts, and began moving over time into the internal, which was more my interest, and teach and practice the embodying of martial arts principles in everyday life. And it works really well, because it's all about relationship. That's what I appreciate about you and me getting together. It's just wonderful. I really appreciate our friendship, because we just meet and we start off. Off we go.
Off we go.
We've been thinking about the same things for a long time. You and I remind me of the double helix.
Yeah.
good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey.
Hi, Brad.
Nice to see you.
So, we've decided to talk about the heart of transformation. The heart of transformation. Because that's what we've both been doing all our lives. Allowing our own transformation. And more than allowing, jumping into it. Which at times was not always so wise. That's the way it works, isn't it? And the heart, because we're both interested in the heart, but you especially have come up with more heart understandings lately.
Mhm. Mhm. I think there's two ways we can perceive the world, two ways we primarily conceive the world, or experience the world. And it's either going to be through that concept of ego, or through the heart. The more ego one has in one's experience of self and the world, the more we rely on the material world and results-oriented kinds of thinking and productivity notions and linear experiences of time and all that sort of thing are connected to ego. And I think when we move into a perception of the world through the heart, we have a very different experience. Ego keeps us separate, heart seems to unite. Ego wants results, heart seems to be looking for experience. And I think it took a long time for me to integrate this. Many years ago, well, maybe about a decade ago now, I was very involved with Sufism and Sufi thought, and really began to see how important this notion of the heart is, and how it's embedded into our language, our experience, especially of relationships, both to the world and to others and to ourselves. And so heart, it seems to me, is the goal, and to be able to increase the experience of consciousness being located in the heart rather than in the ego. And I think it makes a very different world to inhabit as a result.
That reminds me of the heart math people out in California.
Yeah.
I've been out there a couple of times. They know how to pitch a party, I'm telling you. It's work all day and then party at night with some good musicians in their face. Okay. Hot flashes. Heart people. And they've pulled together some hardcore research, which is published, in P less than 0.01 and all that stuff.
Right.
Fits the scientific model, which shows that the heart, as an organ, generates 40 plus more times energy than this slab of meat here.
Yeah, that was astonishing for me to learn, that the heart produces more electromagnetic energy than the brain does.
Yes, isn't that powerful?
It's an amazing thing.
And they're connected. The heart leads the way and the brain follows behind. Except it's like you're talking about in our culture, we've been taught to come from here a lot. It's reversing now, I think. It's changing.
Yeah.
So we have to think. I have to think what I'm going to say next. Now I don't know what I'm going to say because I'm thinking about it. It'll come from heart, it just comes out.
Right. And this is the temptation we were talking about earlier. I got up this morning and I thought, well, what am I going to say today? And then I remembered, no, this is a conversation with George.
Yes.
And I don't have to figure out or know what I'm going to say.
I had a similar experience. There was that little part of me, which I keep. I don't know how to get rid of it.
You can't. I don't think you can.
Yeah, so I like it. I call it my pet. He sits right back here in a little straight chair most of the time. And so he began saying, I should really prepare something. There are people coming, so I need to have something to say. And then I thought immediately, no, what we're doing is having a conversation. We always go wonderful places
Yeah.
when we don't know it. We don't know where we're going.
Well, and I think this is my goal, is to be able to move into this place where experience itself is the primary sought after thing. It's just experience. I think there is no fundamental meaning in the world. I mean, that this plant has no meaning. The thing is to simply experience it.
And then we add meaning.
And then we bring meaning
We
into
do.
the world and into our lives.
I agree with you on that. That's pretty radical, though,
Yeah.
for the thoughts of scientific materialism. That's pretty radical. Experience is what Wu Chi Ku is about too. the thing I teach, Wu Chi Ku. The Taoist way of moving like a cat. I like cats. I like dogs too, but I learn a lot from cats. When a cat doesn't want to do anything, it doesn't do anything at all. And no one can do anything about it.
It's true.
It's true. Then when it wants to do something, it's here. The heart, to me, has been powerful too. When I went to graduate school, I went to one of those scientific schools. It was that time period at University of Florida, and I was told immediately that I should give up any notion as a psychologist of helping anyone. Well, I thought, well, let's see about this. Because there were two people in that department I really liked, so I hung out with them. And what I had to learn to do, which was good, was to learn to use my head. And that was a great voyage, but I almost went insane. I might have, just being head for that school.
Yeah. There is this, I mean, that also doesn't really have any inherent meaning. Knowledge itself, scholarship itself.
You could have saved me a lot of time.
You have to go a long way, though, I think, to really realize it and have this
I think so.
have this experience. Because without this element of experience, of somehow bringing yourself into that scholarship or into that knowledge, it's empty.
Yeah.
Somewhere, and I think this is the function of mythology, this is the function of metaphor, is that where the inner world meets the outer world, that's where metaphor operates. And it allows us to move back and forth and in and out and around. There's a word that I know you know very well, and actually your usage of it has stimulated me to think more about it, perichoresis.
Oh yeah, that's a great word.
The Greek word means, peri means around, and choresis means movement, dance-like movement. Now, theologians have held on to this word for a long time now, and they don't want to let go of it, because to theologians this explains the nature of the Trinity. That the Trinity moves in this fashion, in this perichoretic way, in and out and around, and in this very dance-like kind of thing. And in fact, in Eastern Orthodox tradition, the Trinity is also referred to as the great dance. So it seems to me this is what metaphor provides, is this ability to sort of dance in and around and through these different experiences of consciousness that we have, which aren't separate, by the way, I don't think there is a separateness. There isn't an everyday rational consciousness, and then there's this sort of altered state of consciousness that opens up spirituality in some fashion, or other sensory processes or things like that. I think it's all one thing. And we're just dancing in and out and around it all the time.
Well, what scares people, I believe, from what I've observed, is the loss of self.
Yeah.
That as individuals separate protoplasmic blobs and don't touch me, baby, without my permission. The one who's making his way through the world, you know. This separation that you're talking about, it produces fear and anger, both of those. So opening to the interflow, which is so simple. It's so simple, it's been rediscovered 10 million billion times across the ages, as you well know. It's so simple that we don't want to do it. We don't want to give ourselves up.
No, we don't. No, we work so damn hard to make a self. And then when we get to some point in our lives, we're asked to let it go. And it's like, no, I put a lot of effort into that self.
Oh, into that thing. Here, let me show you my resume.
But what I've noticed is as I get a little bit older and I see it, you've probably had the experience actually more than I.
Well, you think I'm older or something?
You're a generation older than I am, almost exactly. Too. This is the other thing I like about our relationship is that we're connected in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So as we get older, we start having the experience of becoming more and more competent. And we start to be able to do this ego-based life really well. And just about the time we think we understand it, people tell us, you don't have to do that anymore. We'd like somebody else to do it now. and just when you think you really get good, I was telling George earlier, I watched football yesterday all day. And so just when you think you get really good at carrying the ball, they ask you, come on off the field. And the ego doesn't know what to do with that. What do I do now when I move into this different stage of my life?
It's the Talking Heads song. This is not my beautiful life. This is not my house. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. You know, it's just this stuck stuff. And then people rebel against it. We all rebel against it if we had got any sand or salt.
Yeah.
And some of us do it successfully, and some of us die in that encapsulated ego self.
Yeah, literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, both ways. Say some more about metaphor, that word itself. Doesn't it mean above form? Is that?
Metaphor means something like transport.
Oh.
And so, I mean, theoretically, you could stand at a bus stop in Athens and you're waiting for the metaphora. It will take you from this place to that place. That's what metaphor does. It's different. Simile is much more relaxed. Simile is like. The Scottish poet Robert Burns said, "My love is like a red, red rose." That's simile. Metaphor is, my love is a red, red rose. Which makes us wrestle with this, what we feel instinctively to be an impossibility. My love cannot be a red, red rose. We can understand how it can be like a red, red rose, but we can't understand that it is a red, red rose.
And we miss out on so much when we don't know that.
Yes.
If we don't live in poetry,
Yes.
if my love is not a red, red rose, oh, ow, a thorn she had.
So metaphor is demanding though, and that's why we don't live in it, because we don't want to, and we don't want to wrestle with the impossible sameness of love and roses. Instead, we want things to be easier, because then we think we're doing it right if it's easy. We get the message in our culture that if it's hard, if life is difficult sometimes, if emotions are difficult to bear, you're doing it wrong. And that's it's a tremendously flawed view of one's efficacy.
Yes, and it's not just a logical think thing, it's the experience that tells us this. Because something hard, that means there's a boundary here.
Yes.
And if I go, I can't go there,
Mm-hmm.
well, then the game's over. But it's like,
Exactly. And so when we come to that boundary, that's where this tool of metaphor becomes so important, because the metaphor goes right through the boundary.
transport. That's beautiful. So when we speak and think and breathe metaphor, then we're moving into transformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
One of the books that Joseph Campbell wrote was titled "Thou Art That." Metaphor. Not "Thou art kind of like that." But
That's George's next book, right?
You're kind of like a goddess. kind of like a god.
But actually, thou art that.
Thou art that.
And that is the very difficult thing to wrestle with, because most people hear that kind of idea of metaphor, or particularly mythology, which is metaphor, and they say, no, that's a lie. If you say to undergraduates sometimes, give me an example of metaphor, and very often you'll get the definition of simile. This is like that. But if you say, no, metaphor says, this is that, and they say, no, that's a lie.
Well, that lie,
This thing can't be that thing.
that lie is what has disenchanted our universe.
Yes.
Saying it's a lie
Yes.
has disenchanted our universe. And we've disenchanted ourselves in the name of reason and logic in the old sense, the new sense of the term logic. Or in the name of science. If it can't be measured, tasted, touched, if I can't sense it with these physical senses, it doesn't exist.
Yes.
That disenchantment. So what we're talking about, and what many are talking about, is new consciousness, different consciousness, which is really old, ancient consciousness.
Ancient, yes.
Which is open up to the interflow, the perichoresis of all that is.
Yeah.
And being it, not being afraid of it.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that's, as you know, that's fascinated me lately is the Italian Renaissance, and so I'm just, you know, digging into all of that stuff, and you know, one book always opens another one, and so I found my way from Bruno to Poggio and Lucretius, you know, as a result of that, and this whole idea that is so perennial, it's so ancient, but we always forget it. It always has to be, as you said, rediscovered. That there is something magical about the world. And this is what I loved about the Italian Renaissance. These guys were scientists, excellent scientists in their day.
Yes.
But they were fascinated by magic. And the world to them was enchanted. The world was a magical place. It was capable of producing magic and mystery, and they didn't have to, you know, they didn't seem to be compelled to wrestle with this kind of sort of very rational justification of their efforts.
I can see why you're attracted to that. And save your Renaissance attire because it's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's true, and I think the more, I mean, people love quantum physics, and you hear everybody talking about quantum physics, even those that don't really, like myself, don't really understand it. Yet it's such a good metaphor.
Say some more about that.
Well, science is itself a good metaphor. It allows this penetration of boundaries, and the boundary being this mystery of existence. Why are we here? Science does a really good job collecting facts about that and using those facts to make life entertaining and comfortable, and relatively a lot safer than it was 1,000 years ago, for instance. But it's still a metaphor. It can't tell us why. It can't answer the really big ultimate questions about why is there life?
Yes.
Why do I exist? Why do I feel the way I feel? And so it carries with it, because it's such a powerful way of looking into the world, it carries with it a kind of attribution error, where we think that because we have all these facts and that we can know all the facts about a given system and how that system works in its minutest detail, we think then we understand cause. But understanding the facts does not give us any understanding as to cause.
The facts are in a bundle, is another way of saying it. We were talking about a story in Wuchiku Saturday, and the story is simple. I think everyone really knows it. It's our scientists, and of course you and I are not denigrating all scientists. There are a lot of scientists who are mages and magicians. In fact, the top-notch ones are. Our scientists look back in time with the best information and instruments and awareness that we have. And they look back for this universe and this Earth about 15 billion years, something like that. But they can't see beyond that. And there's that cause you're thinking about. It's the mystery.
Right.
Whatever is emerging, whatever came out of that wellspring is still springing. It's still happening. And for us to delimit a certain part of it and say this is all there is, well, that just doesn't make any sense at all. That's why many of us pop out of that. We say, science becomes a religion, in the worst sense of the term, religion.
Yeah.
Something to swear to.
Which is a literalization.
Literalization.
Concretization of the
Yes.
metaphor.
Yes.
And then it no longer allows this kind of permeable movement.
How do people break out of that? Or do they? Do we?
I don't know, maybe it occurs to me as you say that that's a sort of neurosis we develop. And so Otto Rank said, who was one of Freud's, I think, most brilliant students, who eventually was banished. He committed Oedipal heresy.
Oedipal heresy.
He was thrown out. But Rank said that the most defining characteristic of a neurotic is that they have an inability to unlearn. And it seems to me that unlearning is the way to keep metaphor alive. So you're always throwing into question what you think you know. You're always questioning your own assumptions. You're always wondering, well, is that true always? Is that even true some of the time? Or is it just, as Nietzsche said, a comforting illusion, that without which I would suffer?
The Japanese have a saying, which I don't know in Japanese, but I know it in English. Playing ball on running water. That's not getting stuck.
Right.
So, since we're riffing on consciousness today, that makes me think that certain folk then who are stuck in that concrete way, and I don't have anybody in mind, but just in general talking about it, does that mean that they were born with an inability to comprehend because they can't get out? Are we born in a certain consciousness state and we can't go further?
Oh, I wonder sometimes if that's not. I mean, it's a popular notion.
It is a popular notion. We are the way we are.
But I think mostly it's fear that inhibits that movement. We have this fear of losing the self, as we were talking about earlier, or losing our place in the world, losing our family, losing all that stuff that's most important to us.
Yeah, all that stuff that makes us ourselves.
Yeah.
That's it, because we have to give up everything, in order to move out.
And that's exactly the idea, right? At that really seminal kind of beginning place of the Christian mythology. Give up everything.
Give up everything.